Good morning. It is Tuesday, April the 19th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the daily declaration for spiritual warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have Cult of Insanity, No Good Guys, No Free Lunch, Over-Medication, and Ice Storm. All that when I come back. Thank you. And now the daily declaration for spiritual warfare for April the 19th. My truth will remove every false ministry in high places. My child, be aware that in these days there are false teachers among you who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who saved them, and will cause many to reject my teachings and my way of truth. Their judgment has been idle for a long time, and because they have grown cold to the truth, they will bring on themselves and others my swift destruction. Do not listen to their lies and reject their teachings. They must be removed from their lofty seats of comfort, and the results of their disobedience will become an example to any who might be swayed to follow their ways. Rise up like my servant Josiah and stand for me in truth, leading all who know you to turn from evil and to do what is right in my eyes, not turning aside to the right or to the left. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, 2 Kings chapter 22, verses 1 through 2. Prayer declaration. Lord, remove every false ministry and strange god from the high places. Let righteous men with your wisdom sit in the high governmental places of my city and nation. Let the spiritual foundations that were built in my city, community, and nation be restored. Use me to walk in the spirit of Josiah and lead the people into righteousness. Amen. And that was the daily declaration for spiritual warfare for April the 19th. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious and realistic. He is the person that understands that culture is the foundation for politics. He acknowledges a benevolent universe. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes, He is a normal American. Thank you, thank you. What is the true conservative strategy for defeating socialists in this country? Number one, we must properly define conservatism. Then we must organize all potential conservatives under that definition. Once organized, we must dominate American culture. Dominating American culture means that we must rid ourselves of all the various cults the left has foisted upon us in this country. We rid ourselves of the left-wing cults by promoting value. What are the universal values? Number one, life. Number two, privacy. Number three, time. Number four, sanity. Number five, productivity. We defeat promiscuity by promoting family and privacy. Socialists must be driven from positions of power. And since it is lefty counterculture that provides the foundation for their political success, true conservatives must resist left-wing counterculture and promote normal American culture. By changing our culture, we will change our politics. And we change the culture by getting married, creating a family, and raising our children. Thank you, thank you. What are the tactics in support of the strategy to rid America of socialist influence? The long-term tactics are to be a true conservative, talk like a conservative, act like a conservative, dress like a conservative, think like a conservative. The short-term tactics are rhetorical. True conservatives need to win all of the arguments. True conservatives need to defeat the useful idiots on the left that populate their households, workplaces, and churches. That means don't be neutral. Don't try to prove a negative. Don't take their word for it, and ask lots of questions. The useful idiots are the people that simply repeat the latest talking points. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, a constitutional amendment banning abortion throughout the country. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liability to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. Number nine, a flexible minimum wage. Number 10, means-tested health care. And number 11, the immediate and permanent prohibition of investment banking by any office holder. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Number one, bring back not-for-profit news. Number two, defeat the cult of promiscuity with the promotion of privacy. Number three, defeat the cult of neutrality with the effective use of propaganda. Number four, defeat the cult of personality by emphasizing character. Number five, defeat the cult of imagination, psychology, and Hollywood with religion and research. Number six, defeat the cult of reinvention by admitting one's mistakes. Number seven, defeat the cult of death, abortion, infanticide, and assisted suicide. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. The biggest mistakes that right-wing talk show hosts make. Number one, they are neutral. Number 2, they fail to correct their mistakes. 3, they demoralize their audiences. Number 4, they contradict themselves. Back in a minute. Thank you. Left-wing, right-wing vocabulary. The left says, going forward. The right says, from now on. The left says, homeless. The right says, squatter. The left says, migrant. The right says, fugitive. The left says, eliminate. The right says, reduce. Thank you. So one of the cults of the left is the cult of insanity, where they have been promoting insanity and making it something to be admired rather than a pejorative. Why is it that we have situations in our society today, like right now I just heard from John Phillips on KBC that there was a news report of a guy that took a chair, brought it up to the outside of a nail salon, pulled his pants down, sat on the chair facing these ladies and started pleasuring himself. Also, there's another story of a man who shot a woman in the back 2 times, a girlfriend, wife, something like that, killing her, and then walked around bragging about it. What do these two common things have in common? Insanity. It makes you think these people must be crazy or insane. And they're not. They're doing this because they are responding to the pressures of the cult, of the left-wing cult of insanity, in which the left approves of and promotes crazy behavior. We're all guilty of being part of this particular cult, because how many times have we said, wow, that's crazy. Wow, he's crazy. Wow, that's nuts. There's a commercial today for Extreme America's Got Talent. And Simon Cowell is saying, I love it. It's extreme. Because extreme is just another word for, or a code word for, insane or crazy. It used to be, when I was growing up, not only did you not bring a gun to school, you didn't bring a knife to school unless you were in your Boy Scout uniform and it was a Boy Scout approved pocket knife that you might have as part of the uniform. Other than that, you never even brought a knife to school, because if you did, you would instantly become a pariah amongst all the other students. They would think of you as crazy, and they would snicker and titter and talk about you behind your back, and you would become infamous. Nobody would want to be your friend. Nobody's going to show up at your house to ask you if you want to play football, because you're crazy, and nobody likes crazy, and they shouldn't. Crazy is bad. So our society is going to have a lot less of the types of news items as I've just described when we quit valuing crazy. Thank you. So one of the things I was thinking about, I'd said before that with regards to the Republican Party, that the way things work is power between the two Republicans and Democrats. And the way it works is that one party doesn't usually go after the other party in order to try to take power away from them. If the Democrats are in power, then what happens is the Republicans sit and wait for the Democrats to overreach. And then when they overreach, then the Republicans can become the alternative, and people get disgusted with the Democrats. Then Republicans can stand up and say, hey, we're right here. Go ahead and vote for us instead of the overreaching Democrats. And it plays out vice versa. Now, the problem with this Because at first you would think, wow, that's a really shrewd idea. But the problem is that if the Democrats are overreaching like they are now, they're going to lose the election. And they're destroying a lot of lives in the process. And what are the Republicans doing to stop it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Why? Because it's to their political advantage to allow the Democrats to tear this country apart. Or so they believe. And so they will sit back and watch the Democrats create inflation, huge amounts of debt, huge crime rates, all the problems that they complain about now, and they sit back and do nothing about it, make no effort to stop it, because they figure, they gamble that it's in their political best interest to just let it slide. This is why I've said, I was going to say always said, not always, but recently said, that there are no good guys in politics. There's a lot of right-wing talk show hosts, and they get somebody with an R after their name on the show. Ooh, yes, they kiss the guy's ass, suck his dick. Ooh, yes, you're a hero because you got an R after your name. No, you don't do that. There are no good guys in politics, particularly at the federal level. Thank you. And now there's no free lunch. Quote, what I'm not saying is that all government spending is bad, but there is no free lunch. There's no public tooth fairy. Father Christmas does not work on the Treasury staff this year. You can never bail someone out of trouble without putting someone else into trouble, unquote. Dr. Art Laffer. When he speaks in public, Dr. Laffer does a bit where he asks the audience to pretend the entire world is composed of just two farms, and that one farmer is receiving unemployment benefits. He then states that the other farmer is paying the unemployment benefits. Then he asks the audience if this is going over their heads. It's always good for a laugh. And yet, while we can laugh at the obviousness of his point with only two farms, we seem to miss this entirely when it comes to a populous society. Government spending is, by definition, confiscatory. And government spending is, by definition, redistributionist. And there are some legitimate expenses in government. But to fail to understand the cost of lunch, the trade-off, is to leave ourselves susceptible to the worst kind of applied economics. And that was No Free Lunch by Mr. Bonson. Thank you. And now from the book, The Collapse of Parenting by Dr. Sachs, Chapter 3, the last part of Chapter 3, about why it is that our kids are medicated or over-medicated. Bottom line, on this parameter, if you're a kid, living in the United States is a major risk factor for being put on medication. And the risk increases as you move from childhood into adolescence. You'd be at much lower risk if you moved to England, although rates of diagnosis of ADHD are on the rise in England as well. I know an American family that spent several years living in England. They had one son who was an average student. Not great, but not terrible. When the family returned home to the United States, the parents enrolled him in the local public school. Mom was startled by the continual drumbeat from teachers and other parents. Maybe your son has ADHD. Have you considered trying a medication? She told me it was weird, like everybody was in on this conspiracy to medicate my son. In England, none of the kids are on medication. Or if they are, it's a secret. But I really don't think many are. Here it seems to be almost all the kids are on medication, especially the boys. Why is ADHD so much more common in the United States today than it was 30 or 40 years ago? And why is it so much more common today in the United States than elsewhere? My answer is the medicalization of misbehavior. Instead of correcting our kids' misbehavior, we American parents today are more likely to medicate our kids in the hopes of fixing the behavior problem with a pill. We parents in the United States are not doing our job of enculturation, as I explained that job in Chapter 1. Neither we, the parents, nor the schools, nor the TV shows, nor the internet are adequately teaching Fulgham's rules, such as play fair, don't hit people, put things back where you found them. As a result, kids born and raised in the United States are now many times more likely to be diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder and to be treated with powerful medications compared to kids living elsewhere. Today, American parents are hungry for brain-based explanations. Instead of removing the cell phone and the laptop from their kids' bedroom so their kids can get a good night's sleep, many American parents are medicating their kids with powerful stimulants such as Adderall or Concerta or Vyvanse or Metadate to compensate for their sleep deprivation, usually without any awareness that sleep deprivation, not ADHD, is the underlying problem responsible for their kids' failure to pay attention. Likewise, instead of acknowledging that their kid misbehaves and or is disrespectful, many American parents would prefer that a doctor diagnose an imbalance in brain chemistry and prescribe Risperdal, Seroquel, Adderall, or Concerta. Recall Dylan, the boy I described a few pages back. A board-certified child psychiatrist concluded that Dylan had both ADHD and oppositional defiance disorder. But the psychiatrist was mistaken. Dylan had neither ADHD nor oppositional defiance disorder. The proximate cause of Dylan's lack of attention was not ADHD, but sleep deprivation. And Dylan was sleep deprived because his parents were not aware of the time he was wasting playing video games in his bedroom. When that problem was fixed, Dylan's situation improved without medication. Dylan's case illustrates how the abdication of parental authority led to a psychiatrist prescribing medication. I see that sort of thing almost every day I'm in the office. And that was actually the third part of Chapter 3 of the book, The Collapse of Parenting. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Chapter 18 from the book, Tales from My Bicentennial Year, which is about a family living in the Adirondacks, Gansevoort, New York, in 1975. Chapter 18, The Great Ice Storm. It was just a week or so before the big day, Christmas. Best of all, the big day fell midweek, so we got a whole 2 weeks off from school with both Christmas and New Year's Eve on Thursdays. There had been no snow so far this year, which was really not usually the case for us. Heck, the other day it was 50 degrees. It had started to get really cold yesterday. I'm not sure of the high temperature, but it was certainly a lot colder than the day before. At supper that night, my dad told us he was leaving for a business trip the next day. It wasn't that unusual for him to be gone, so we were pretty much used to it. I knew it was my job to make sure that if it snowed, to shovel in the morning. My father also told all of us, with an especially pointed glance in my direction, to behave for my mother when he was gone for the next few days, or Christmas would not happen. I had to think for a minute. How could Christmas not happen? Certainly my dad could not stop Christmas. If I was good, Christmas was going to happen. If I was bad, Christmas was going to happen. As I was thinking about this out loud, my dad interrupted my thoughts with, I can stop your Christmas from being a good one. Got it? No presents and Santa won't stop at this house. I assured him all would be okay on my end. There was absolutely no reason to upset the Claus. He, after all, had quite a list in his hands for me. I knew for some reason that something was not altogether right about what the adults said about Santa, but I dared not question it. I knew that I would get only one of the big things that I was looking to get, but one big thing was better than none. After dinner, we sat down in the living room to watch some TV. My pops wanted to watch the news so he could hear the weather report. He told me, yes, Mike, the TV remote control, to put it on Channel 10 for the weather, so he could watch Big Bob Kavasich, his favorite weather guy. Bob did the weather like he was excited about it. I mean, the guy got thrilled telling you how bad the weather would be. The messier the weather, the happier the guy was. Tonight, he was really happy. My pops was not so happy. He had to drive in the weather no matter if it was sunny or snowy. From what Big Bob was saying, we were either going to stay warm and get a lot of rain, or the cold air would come down from Canada and we would get snow. And if we got snow, we would get a lot of it. My pops wanted to get to bed early so he could leave earlier to wherever it was he was going. He figured he was not supposed to start doing whatever it was he was going to do until about 8 or 9 p.m. My mom was going to let us stay up late, all the way until 9 o'clock. One of our favorite Christmas shows was on. This was the year without a Santa Claus. We liked it because they had two brothers in it, Heat Miser and Snow Miser. The Heat Miser hated snow and hated his brother Snow Miser, and the same was true for Snow Miser. They both had these pretty cool songs they sang. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. The Heat Miser would sing, I'm Mr. Heat Miser, I'm Mr. 101. Whatever I touch seems to melt in my clutch. And then his little minions would sing, he's too much, da-na-na-na. The Cold Miser would sing, I'm Mr. Cold Miser, I'm Mr. 10 Below. Whatever I touch seems to freeze in my clutch. And then his little minions would sing, he's too much, da-na-na-na. After the Miser brothers were ordered off to bed, I woke up in the morning kind of surprised. It was light out, and no one was yelling at me to go get moving and get to the bus stop, or go out and shovel a driveway. Then it dawned on me it was either Saturday or we had a snow day, a coveted snow day, a miracle from heaven in this Christmas season. No school. Slow down, I told myself. Don't get too excited yet. I needed to see the snow. I needed to confirm the Big Bob Kavosich forecast, that we had indeed received snow instead of rain. I was afraid to go look out the window of my bedroom. What if it was simply light out already, no snow, and I was really late for school? Maybe my mom fell back asleep after my dad left early. What if we had school? I sat up in my bed, threw off my NFL bedspread, put my feet down, and started walking over to the window. I wanted to look, but couldn't bring myself to it. I pulled my arm back from the curtain 3 or 4 times, and then finally, I grabbed the curtain. I slowly pulled it back. I saw that it was raining. Big, giant raindrops. Rain? Why wasn't I in school? I moved my head closer to the window, rubbed my eyes a little, and really looked out. My face was up against the cold glass. Then everything came into view. As I looked at our little valley neighborhood, even though it was raining, everything was shiny. It was glowing. The trees looked like they were made out of expensive crystal. The mountains were reflecting back at me. Our driveway was a skating rink. The telephone pole lines were sagging with the ice hanging on the wires. The grass looked like each individual blade of grass was covered in ice. Despite the rain and clouds, everything was shining and bright. I could see our woods, the sand pit, the cow pastures, all reflecting back, all covered in this ice. It was a sight I had never seen before. Calming. I ran out to the kitchen screaming at my mom as to what happened. She said that the cold air came in underneath the warm air, so that when it rained way up in the clouds where it was warm, by the time it came down to the ground, the cold air had frozen it. Pops got out early this morning and was heading south, so he should be okay. And the best thing of all, school was closed today. We finally had a snow day, off because of bad weather. I couldn't wait to get outside and go exploring. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. There we go. I called over to Mike C's house, and his mother would not even put him on the phone. He was sick, she said, and needed to stay inside. Okay, I said. Sounded more like he was in trouble, but I was not about to ask. Whatever trouble he was in, he could stay with him. I wanted to get outside. I called up the Tidwells, and huge Gene was up for going outside, but not Brad for some reason. Gene said he would get Russ and meet me up outside. Heck, I didn't even eat breakfast. I got dressed for outside in record time and headed out. I ran out on the front porch, slipped, fell down, and slid over the steps. I thought I was headed down the stairs head first until I grabbed the porch railing and stopped myself. I went down the steps like a little baby, one step at a time, holding the railing all the way down. If anyone was watching, it was a little embarrassing, but I made it. Everything had an inch or so of ice on it. Once I got down the stairs, I figured the best way to get around was to act like I was skating without my skates on. I managed to boot skate my way to huge Gene's. Big Russ was already there. Big Russ was holding his old sled, the kind with wood planks sitting on top of two steel runners, and it had a steering bar so you could get the sled going right or left. In the kind of snow we normally had, the runner sled sucked. It would not go far at all and always got stuck. We used the flat, what we call red sleds. They were basically rectangular-shaped plastic that allowed you to run with it, and then while running, put it down, holding the yellow handles, on the hill and jump onto it lying face down. You could get a pretty good run going with it, and using your hands for steering, you could go pretty far. Once we got the hill packed down, you could go sledding for quite a ways. Big Russ was smiling while he's holding this up. "Why are you smiling, Russ? What you got planned?" huge Gene asked. Big Russ's smile just got bigger and bigger. "Guys, look at Sledding Hill. It's covered, the whole thing, in over an inch of ice. With the runner sled, we can go for miles. We can break the old record. We can go down the first hill, make the turn around where the creek juts out, then between the fence posts and into the second pasture down the second hill and all the way to the creek. We'll be heroes." This idea had some merit. For years, we'd always tried to make it past the fence posts. Once you did, there was a whole other hill you could go down and theoretically make it to the creek at the very bottom of our little valley. We grabbed huge Gene's red sled, just to have, and boot skated our way down the street to Cobar Road. Once we got to Cobar Road, you could really see how awesome it looked. Behind us was a view of the Adirondacks shimmering back at us. In front of us was our little valley all glittering. We got to the top of the sledding hill, which was nothing more than Mayor Bill Campbell's cow pasture. We crossed over the barbed wire fence and made it to the top of the first hill. We had a nice hill. Off to the right of the hill was the woods. The tree line came crashing down the side of the hill and formed a little stream really, that flowed between the hill and the woods. This time of the year, it was usually frozen over. The stream jutted out and made like an S-curve a ways down our hill. Our hill kind of flattened out a couple of 100 yards down and then had 100 feet or so of pretty flat land. Back in a minute. Thank you. We usually had just enough speed to make it down the first hill, but when it flattened out, your ride was pretty much over. If you could make it to the second hill, you were in for quite a ride. The first hill was surrounded by barbed wire. To get to the second hill, you had to go between two fence posts that were about 10 feet apart where there was no barbed wire. If you could make it past them, you really picked up speed because the hill dropped off pretty steeply. Then you could follow the stream all the way down to where it ran into the big creek at the bottom. It would truly be a legendary ride. We continued to boot skate and slip and slide on top of the hill. The three of us stood there trying to come up with the best strategy for this legendary ride, thinking out loud about how this would go down in our neighborhood. We would be celebrated and cheered for making it all the way down to the creek, a feat many have dreamed about, and now our ice storm had made possible. We decided that it was all for one and one for all. The three of us would go down together or die trying. Usually we got a running start and jumped onto the sled. Today, with the ice, we figured we were okay to start on the sled. Besides, none of us could walk, let alone run on the ice. Big Russ put the sled down on the top of the hill. He laid face down on it. Huge Gene got on top of Big Russ. I, being the lightest, got on top of both of them. "Ready?" yelled Russ. He had his hands holding two big frozen rocks and was ready to pull back and send us down just like a bobsledder. "Ready," we both yelled back. Russ pulled back and then shot us forward. We took off like a rocket. With the ice, we felt every little bump, and now there were lots of them. We were sailing now, hitting the bumps, rocking back and forth, but we were moving really fast. Russ was doing his best to steer us, but we were heading straight for the little stream. Turn, Russ, the stream," we were yelling at him. I know, Russ yelled back. The sled, from what we could tell, pretty much went where it wanted. We were headed right for the part of the stream that juts out. We hit the edge of the bank and flew into the air like we had gone off a ramp. The flight of the sled caused me to roll off the top in midair. I landed on the other side of the creek and rolled into some frozen grass and bushes. Huge Gene fell off the other side of the sled and the other side of the stream and kept sliding on his body until he hit the flat part of the hill and came to a slow stop. Big Russ went sailing right on top of the stream. I looked up and saw him trying to steer the sled on the frozen stream when just then the sled stopped sharp and the momentum swung Big Russ into the side of the S-curve wall of the stream. Turns out the sled runners cut through the ice and stopped. Back in a minute. Thank you. We all looked up at each other, moaning about how that hurt. Well, we got up all laughing at each other and the flips we took. We knew now that it would not be as simple as just going down. We'd have to plan our path, maybe start out more on the left side, where we could possibly miss the stream. It would mean a longer curve for steering us through the posts, but it was better than hitting the stream again. Big Russ went over and grabbed his sled. He picked it up after some work, and after all, it was stuck in the ice. He held it up and announced that the middle board was broken. We looked at it, and sure enough, it was broken. Huge Gene thought that it was okay because he brought over his red sled. We just put that on top of the runner sled, and we would be okay. Getting back up the frozen hill was no easy task. We were okay on the bottom flat part, but how do you climb a frozen hill? Answer is, you can't. Our hill follows Cobar Road down all the way to the creek. The salt trucks had been out, and we figured that while our hill was still frozen, we could probably walk on that road, now that it was salted. It was a couple of 100 feet or so out of the way, but it was a heck of a lot easier. We got back up to the top of the hill, crossed over the barbed wire fence again, and boot skated back out to the top. We analyzed the situation again. Big Russ pointed the runner sled more towards the road than towards the woods. Huge Gene placed his red sled on top of the runner sled. We surveyed the run again just to make sure. This time, we would face down along the road, which was alongside the barbed wire fence. Then we would make a sharp turn once we arrive at the flat part, circle around between the fence posts, and then down into the promised land of the second hill. We piled on, just like before. Big Russ on the bottom, Huge Gene in the middle, and me on top. "Ready," Russ yelled out. "Ready," we yelled back. And again, Big Russ pushed back with his hands, and then shot us forward. Gene and Russ were both pushing us along with their hands for a little ways, trying both to steer us on the right path and get us some speed. Once again, we were flying. This time it felt twice as fast as before. There were not as many bumps slowing us down as on the other side of the hill. You could see the trees whizzing by and then looking down as we see the ice shooting underneath us. We were all yelling out, "Whoa," and "Wow," and whatnot. It came time for Russ to begin turning us so we could get between the fence posts. Turn it, Russ," Huge Gene was yelling. I'm trying. Lean to the right and help out," Russ commanded. So all three of us leaned to the right as Russ was trying to steer to the right. Bail out, the steering broke, bail out." Russ was panicking and screaming at us. I don't know how he did it, but he rolled out from under both of us. Gene rolled the other way, and I came down right on the red sled that was now off the runner sled. I was still going, and fast. I looked back at Russ and Jean, who were both slowly coming to a stop, but were both yelling something at me. I looked back up front, and all I could see was that fence post right in front of me. Bam! Back in a minute. Thank you. The next part of the story will be told from the point of view of Huge Gene and Big Russ as they've retold it over the years. Russ: I yelled for everyone to bail out. I don't know why he stayed in the sled, and then I tried telling the idiot to steer away from the fence posts. Why the heck he didn't listen, I don't know. Gene: he's a dumbass. Russ: well, maybe, but we saw him hit the post. Gene: he hit it with his head. Smack. Right into it. Couldn't believe it. Russ: we ran down to him and he was just lying there. We thought he was dead. Gene: yeah, you don't recover from a head wound like that. Russ: so we scooped him up and onto the red sled. Gene: we thought about leaving him there, but somehow figured that would be, trouble. Russ: so we put him on the sled. Now, mind you, we were all the way down the hill and had to pull him all the way back up the hill and then to his house. Gene: he's a dumbass. Russ: we got to Cobar Road and then had to get him through the barbed wire fence and then out onto the road because we still couldn't walk up the frozen hill. Gene: so it seemed to us that the easiest thing to do was to see if we could slide him under the bottom wire of the fence. Seemed a lot easier than going over it. Russ: so I had Gene lift up the bottom wire and push the sled through. I had to push hard because it was kind of up a little hill and I was slipping and falling. So I gave him a big push. And anyway, he went slipping under the barbed wire fence with more than an inch to spare. Gene: the problem was it was still icy. He made it under the barbed wire all right and then kept going. Right back down the hill, only this time in the road. He didn't need to worry about steering now. He just kept going down the road. Russ: well, heck, if we were in trouble before, we were really in trouble now. We took off after him, of course, and finally caught up with him. Gene: then we pulled him all the way up the hill to the top of Cobar Road. Russ: we did take a break or two, though. It was tough pulling him up that hill. Gene: then we got to our street. I looked over at my house. I certainly did not want to bring him there. Russ: I looked at my house and I knew my parents weren't home. So we thought we'd bring him there and hope he wakes up. We could warm up, look at some penthouses, and then wake him up. Gene: problem was, after being at Russ's for about an hour, the dumbass never woke up. The boy was out cold. Now we were worried. What if he was dead? We thought maybe we should just take him back to the woods and say he's with us, but we lost him. Russ: we like him and everything, but this was big trouble. Gene: so we decided that we needed to help him, and who best to help him than his own mom? So we put him back on the red sled and pulled him as quickly as we could over to his house. Russ: I pulled him to the bottom of his stairs, and with a stick from the ground, Gene reached up and knocked on the door. Once we knew we had somebody's attention, we ran away. Back in a minute. Thank you. Why would they run away? Fear of the trouble they would be in, I guess. Even though the accident was not anyone's fault, at the time one of your friends arrives at home unconscious, it's usually time for trouble. My poor mother was the one who suffered the most from this. You see, at the same time Gene and Russ ran away, my sister Chris saw me laying in the sled. She yelled for my mom, who ran outside, yelling at me to get up and get inside. Of course, I was out cold and not paying attention to her. Caused her to think I was simply not obeying her, which made her even more upset. She made her way down the icy steps and shook me to no avail. At that point, she was worried. Instead of calling an ambulance to possibly save my life, she called Mrs. Tidwell to find out where Gene and Brad were and what happened. Brad had never left the house, and Gene was nowhere to be found. This sent Mrs. Tidwell into a frenzy, and she called down to Mike C.'s mom, who was more than happy to report that Mike C. was home sick all day and not part of any activities. But if she saw Gene, she would report. My mom, realizing now that I was unconscious, called the police department. This is before the days of 911. In a few minutes, the New York State troopers were headed down my street. I would have loved to see Huge Gene's and Big Russ's face when they saw the trooper car come screaming down the road. The trooper saw the bump on my head and called an ambulance. This also came screaming down the road. Huge Gene and Russ must have been shitting pickles at this point. The ambulance packed me up and was taking me to the hospital, but my mom was home alone with all 5 of us. So the trooper put all the kids in his car, and my mom rode with me in the ambulance. It must have been quite a sight to behold. The ambulance and the trooper car, sirens blaring, lights going, Huge Gene and Big Russ on the lam. My mom managed to track down my dad, again years before cell phones. He came to the hospital later on that evening, took me and all of us home. I'd managed to regain consciousness, but I had no idea who I was or where we were going or anything. I was in that state of mind all through Christmas vacation. To quote my dad, Christmas did not happen for me. Huge Gene and Big Russ tried hiding in Russ's house. They felt pretty secure there until they saw the troopers come charging down the street. They figured they better get out of there because it was the first place the cops would look. They slipped out the back of Russ's house through the basement door and commando ran all the way through the backyards and cornfields to Mike C's backyard. They wanted to get to Mike C., but scrapped that idea. Mrs. C saw the troopers and ambulance and was still freaking out from my mom's phone call. She realized the situation called for extraordinary measures. Mrs. C thought about it and then sent out the one person who could find Gene and Russ, and liked doing it. Little John was given a mission, and any chance to pulverize one of us was always a good thing to him. He charged out the back door of his house and immediately spotted them. He ordered them to stop, but they were having none of it. Little John ran and skidded after them on the ice, lunged for both of them like they were tackling dummies. He brought them to the ground and then to the justice of one Nancy, Mrs. Tidwell. It was just like Nixon. They were not in trouble for the original actions, but for the cover-up. And that's the end of chapter 18, The Ice Storm, from the book Tales from My Bicentennial Year, a story of a family in upstate New York in 1975. Next chapter for next time is called Cicada. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that is spiritual. He's the man that seeks consensus. He's subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He is informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He is impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He is deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He is skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, and reminding you to listen to the John and Ken Show on KFI AM 640, Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Also, KFI needs to bring back Brian Suits and his show, The Dark Secret Place. Hashtag bring back Brian Suits. Until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.